During a camping trip in the frozen wilderness of Wyoming, my only son coldly abandoned me to the mercy of the unforgiving wild. He left me without a single scrap of food, a drop of water, or any survival equipment, and only spat out one venomous line: "Goodbye, Father. If the bears don't tear you apart, the hunger surely will." In his mind, I would perish either from starvation or from the claws of wild beasts so that he could easily seize my inheritance. But he was wrong. When Finn returned home, the man he thought was dead was already waiting for him, sitting calmly with a knowing smile. I looked straight into his eyes and said, "I have a surprise for you, and you will never believe what's about to happen." Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you're watching from, because this is one story you won't want to miss a single detail of. Outside, the sky hung heavy and gray, drizzle tapping relentlessly against the window panes. Distant thunder rolled, lightning flickered and died, leaving the living room dim except for the faint glow of a single yellow lamp. The air was thick, suffocating, an omen of something dark about to unfold. In that cold room, the only sounds were the scratch of my pen against paper and the steady tick of the clock. I sat at the desk, eyes fixed on the unpaid bills piled before me. Suddenly, the front door burst open. A gust of icy wind slammed inside, rain spraying across the floor. Finn stormed in, hoodie soaked through, sneakers squeaking on the wooden boards, shattering the silence like an axe splitting wood. His voice cut through the room, sharp and commanding, more an order than a plea. "Dad, give me $7,000, tonight." I froze, pen still clenched in my hand. The words sliced through the air like a blade. This wasn't a son asking for help. This was a demand. "Finn, what?" I tried to keep my tone steady. He paced across the room, fists clenched, eyes bloodshot. "Don't dodge it. I'm not asking. I'm telling you." I answered slowly. "I already sent you your allowance this month. 3,000. That should still be there." His voice cracked, swelling with rage. 3,000? That barely covers rent. You think that's enough? You think that's living? I swallowed hard. The Carhartt jacket on my shoulders suddenly felt tight, reeking of motor oil from the gearbox I'd fixed for Mrs. Tran earlier that day. I had built these repair shops with 22-hour workdays after Venus passed, sacrificing my youth so he would never know what it meant to go without. "Son, we've talked about this. You need to find steady work." Finn spun on me, face flushed, his words seething. "Work? So I can end up like you? Slaving away your whole life for grease and calloused hands?" My chest tightened. I straightened unconsciously, military discipline flashing through my posture. "Finn, you've crossed the line. I gave up my youth to build what you so easily despise." He let out a bitter laugh, eyes blazing with contempt. "Do you want to know what real responsibility is? When you're gone, I'll run these shops, and I'll run them better than you ever did." The air froze solid. My words stumbled out in disbelief. What did you just say?" His eyes locked on me, cold, calculating, predatory. No trace left of the boy I had raised. I was speechless. 20 years of fatherhood, sacrifice, burden, hope, all crumbled in an instant. Finn realized too late what he'd revealed. Without another word, he turned and stormed out. The slam of the door reverberated like a death sentence against 2 decades of father and son. On the mantel, the family photo rattled. Venus's face behind the glass, once radiant with joy, seemed to tremble with fury, as though blaming me for letting our son become this. I stood frozen, eyes locked on her smile. Outside, Finn's engine roared, then faded into the storm. My hand gripped the pen until my knuckles whitened, but inside I was hollow. In that dim room, only silence remained, the silence of a father who had just heard his own son calculating his death. The morning was bleak. Pale light filtered through the dust-coated window, casting its dim glow onto the family photo resting on the shelf. I reached out to adjust the frame. Venus's face emerged youthful, radiant, holding 8-year-old Finn tightly during a Little League baseball game. My chest tightened, breath caught in my throat. Memories surged violently. striking like a thunderclap. Venus's funeral. Finn stood beside me, lost in a suit 3 sizes too big. His tiny hand clutched mine as I struggled not to collapse. That image remains seared into me, a scar that never fades. At that time, the mortgage on my first auto shop was 3 months overdue. Venus's hospital bills had drained every cent of our savings. In her final breath, I had made a vow. I will take care of Finn. I will give him everything you couldn't. By Thursday, I had pulled the old photo albums off the shelf. Each page I opened cut deeper into my chest, reminders of sacrifices I had buried, or perhaps deliberately forgotten. $55,000 a year for private school tuition because Venus believed public schools weren't good enough for her son. Back then, I told myself, this is the price of a future. But looking back, it was only the price of breeding dependence. The Stanford diploma, along with the dorm life he insisted on, I paid, like a man signing a contract that could never be negotiated, $23,000 for a brand new Ford Mustang because he sneered at every used car. I still remember my hands blackened with grease as I carried a stack of cash to the dealership, telling myself, this is a gift to help him start strong. But the truth, it was nothing more than another chain. I paused at a photo of Finn's 16th birthday. In his eyes, there was no fire, only a shadowy emptiness, as though each check I signed had slowly extinguished the light of his youth. While other teenagers worked summer jobs, Finn sat behind a screen, living off the monthly allowance I deluded myself into calling an investment in his future. Piece by piece, the puzzle came together into a merciless picture. Every failure I rescued him from, every crisis I smothered with money, every handout I had been grinding away his character. I once believed I was a good father, but in the end, I created a stranger who could calculate his own father's death as though it were a profitable business deal. That Saturday night, I sat in Venus's old chair, the one I had never had the heart to throw away. It still seemed to hold her spirit, forcing me to face the bitterest failure of my life, my failure as a father. The dim yellow light fell across the photo frame, Venus's smile trembling as if to ask, if I were alive, would I forgive you? I choked, whispering into the emptiness. I failed you, Venus. I thought providing was love, but with my own hands, I raised a stranger. That truth sank into me like the winter cold of Wyoming. For 20 years, I hadn't raised a son. I had bought him. And now, he sat calculating my death as if it were just another business contract. Sunday morning, a pale light filtered through the dust-coated window, casting its dim glow across a study cluttered with unpaid bills. Outside, rain drummed steadily against the roof tiles, distant thunder rolling like a vague warning. Inside, the room was drowned in shadow, broken only by the scratch of a pen against paper and the relentless ticking of the wall clock. I sat motionless before a blank page, my hand trembling slightly as I held the pen. Military discipline forced me to steady my breathing, to keep my mind clear. I was writing down possibilities I had never wanted to imagine, possibilities that could end everything. One ring, then another. The shrill sound shattered the silence, stabbing into my chest, knocking the pen from my hand. On the screen glowed a familiar name. Finn. I hesitated for a few seconds before picking up. Hello, son. His voice came too bright, too even, as if rehearsed in front of a mirror dozens of times. Dad, I've just thought of a way for everything to go back to the way it used to be. All you have to do is agree. I narrowed my eyes, doubt pressing heavy inside me. I'm fine, surprised to hear from you, after what happened last week. About that, I've been thinking. I was wrong, way out of line. But now I have an offer, an opportunity to mend everything. This is the last time, Dad. If you refuse, there'll be nothing left to save. His words were too quick, too polished. I stayed silent, letting military discipline remind me of the value of waiting. Let's go camping in Wyoming, in Glacier National Park. Just father and son, like when I was a kid, remember? I've already prepared everything. This chance won't come again. The suggestion lashed across me like a whip. Finn had abandoned all interest in the outdoors since high school. Why now? This sudden change. Finn, why so sudden? Since when do you know how to arrange a camping trip? Come on, Dad. Remember when you taught me to read animal tracks, to start a fire with wet wood? You always said the wilderness shows a man's true character. This is our chance to remember that no city pressure, no distractions, just you and me under God's sky. Those memories pierced me, dragging Venus into my thoughts, the late wife who had believed in the power of father and son. Now only her fading smile remained in the photo frame. Finn lowered his voice, as if to sound sincere. The flight departs April 19th, Portland to Bozeman, then we'll drive into Glacier. 5 days in the mountains, just like old times. 5 days, I repeated, my voice heavy as lead. Please, Dad, the tickets expire tomorrow. This might be our last chance. The silence stretched. I glanced at the unfinished legal documents on my desk pages that could change the course of a life, preparations for something I had prayed would never come. Every instinct drilled into me screamed, "Don't go." But one part of my heart, the part that still longed to be a father, whispered, "Try one more time." "All right," I said at last, my voice low. "But remember this, I won't endure another disappointment." "Really? That's great. I'll send you the flight details. Meet me at the airport gate, Dad. This trip will change everything." The line went dead. The long, monotonous beep echoed like fate knocking at the door. I set the phone down, my hand still trembling. Outside the window, drizzle blurred the view of Portland, each drop erasing the city piece by piece. I looked again at the documents spread across the desk, heavy as a verdict suspended above my head. Hope and preparation both made me feel as though I had betrayed myself. 2 days later, I carefully folded the stack of legal documents and slipped them into the inner pocket of my duffel bag. Those papers felt as if they weighed 1,000 pounds, carrying possibilities I had never dared to imagine in my lifetime. At gate C-15, Finn was waiting. He bounced on his heels like an overexcited child, the brand-new backpack still dangling its tag from the zipper. When he saw me, his smile stretched far too wide, almost forced. "Dad, right on time, they just called for boarding." "You seem excited," I replied, my eyes scanning his face, the subtle twitch at the corner of his left eye. 25 years in the military had taught me how to read the difference between genuine joy and tension disguised as it. Finn slung the pack over his shoulder, his voice full of cheer but stiff underneath. "This will be the last adventure we'll ever need, Dad. After this, everything will change." The loudspeaker echoed overhead, passengers buzzing as they filed through the gate. Outside, rain pattered against the glass, the sky a heavy slab of gray. The bustle of the terminal stood in sharp contrast to the weight pressing down in my chest. On the first flight, Finn went on endlessly about nature photography, about the fresh Oregon air he claimed to crave. Yet he kept checking his phone, far more than necessary for someone who wanted to disconnect. I shared a few stories from my survival training days, how to read weather signs, identify edible plants, and navigate without GPS. "Do you really know all that, Dad?" Finn asked, scribbling hurriedly onto a napkin. 25 years in the service teach you to be ready for anything." Something flickered in his eyes, not admiration, but calculation. During the layover, he excused himself to the restroom 3 times, each absence nearly 20 minutes. Each time he returned, his eyes shone brighter, as if he had just sealed a deal in the shadows. As the final plane soared over the jagged ranges of Oregon, I looked out the window at peaks sharp as the teeth of some colossal beast devouring the sky. Finn kept his gaze fixed outward, but in the glass reflection, I saw only the weight of tension heavier than any thrill. Bozeman greeted us with biting cold and the damp stench of snow. At the rental counter, I handled the paperwork for a Ford Explorer while Finn loaded the gear, his right shoulder drawn tight as if in pain. "Next stop, the Outfitter," he announced, eyes glued to his phone. At Mountain Trail Outfitters, Finn insisted on buying everything: high-powered flashlights, emergency flares, coils of heavy rope, far more than any ordinary camping trip would require. The shopkeeper, his face weathered by mountain winds, raised an eyebrow. "Packing all this, kid? Sounds like you're looking for trouble instead of avoiding it. Finn laughed quickly. Just want to be thorough. Highway 2 stretched endlessly ahead, a gray ribbon cutting through the forest and mountains. Snow-capped peaks glittered in the fading light. Warning signs for moose crossings and icy roads flashed beneath the headlights. I tried to break the heavy silence. Beautiful, isn't it? The wilderness is magnificent. Finn pressed his lips together, his voice laced with a strange satisfaction. Yeah, remote. The farther from everything, the better. No one to interrupt. We stopped for gas after nightfall. While I filled the tank, through the fluorescent-lit window I saw him hunched over his phone, whispering urgently into it. When he came back, I asked, "Everything okay? I saw you on the phone." "Just checking the weather. There's a snowstorm, but it'll clear by morning." He avoided my eyes. A lie too smooth. I had already checked the forecast, clear skies for 3 days. 52 miles later, I asked again. What did the weather service actually say? Finn gripped the door handle tightly. Just a little snow. I've prepared for everything. The doubts in me were no longer fleeting. By the time we reached the Yellowstone boundary, wooden signs loomed through the mist. The visitor center was nearly empty, only a handful of hikers and a couple of staff lingering. The Yellowstone Timber Lodge came into view, dark wooden cabins with a faded sign. The young receptionist, her hands roughened by the cold, processed our check-in while stealing glances at Finn, who was poring over a trail map. "First time in Yellowstone?" she asked. "For him, yes," I nodded. "I trained in Oregon during my service." "Which trail are you planning to take?" Finn cut in. "The Black Elk Trail. The farthest, the wildest. We want the full experience." Her face immediately paled. "That's the toughest route. 42 miles from the nearest ranger station, no signal coverage. It's crawling with grizzlies, wolves, and the moose this season are vicious." Just then, Ranger Victor Carson stepped inside. His posture was solid, his voice deep and stern, like nails driven into wood. "You boys understand what you're asking for? The Black Elk Trail is no joke. A helicopter rescue out there could take days." Finn smirked. "My father's practically a survival expert. We'll be fine." After signing the liability waivers, we rented a bear-proof canister and an emergency GPS unit. I also picked up a Remington 870. Finn glanced at it, his voice uneasy. "Dad, do you really need that?" I answered, my eyes locked on him. "Rule number 1 in Oregon. No one walks into bear country unarmed." As we pulled away from the ranger station, I glanced into the rearview mirror. The visitor center receded, swallowed by the white fog. On my phone, the signal bars vanished one by one. Finn smirked, his voice low, deliberate. "Perfect. Now there's no turning back, right, Dad?" Ice crawled through my chest. Those words didn't sound like encouragement. They sounded like a sentence. The last door to civilization had slammed shut. Before me lay only raw wilderness, where even nature itself seemed to be waiting patiently to devour us whole. The forest road narrowed gradually, branches scraping against the car windows with a chilling screech, like claws raking across the lid of a coffin. The GPS flickered, then went dark. We had just passed the last tower, the last signpost. All connection to civilization vanished in an instant. "We're officially off the map now," I muttered, staring at the blank icon on my phone screen. Finn chuckled, the hollow sound echoing through the stillness. "Perfect. Just you, me, and nature. No one else intruding." Mile 25, Black Elk Trail, marked the final point accessible by vehicle. I parked beside a few rotting wooden posts, dim in the fading twilight like forgotten gravestones. While unloading, the difference between our backpacks was glaring. Mine was neat and orderly, shaped by 25 years of military rigor. Finn's was clumsy, overstuffed, and lopsided. "Feels like a noose around my neck," he grumbled, staggering under the strap. I adjusted it for him, brushing his right shoulder. He winced. "You're injured?" "Old wound. Nothing serious." We followed the trail into the dense spruce forest. Little sunlight pierced the canopy, leaving only a twilight gloom. The murmur of a brook, the cry of an eagle, and then an eerie, distant howl. "Dad, did you hear that?" Finn froze, his face pale. Wolves, probably 7 miles out, I said, continuing forward. But the truth echoed in my mind. His fear wasn't of nature. 3 hours of climbing brought us to a clearing along the Clearwater Stream, a perfect campsite. My military instinct surveyed escape routes and defensible positions. Finn collapsed onto a log, gasping. How much farther? This is far enough. Tomorrow we go deeper. Setting camp only highlighted his clumsiness. While I hung the food bag 12 feet high and separated the cooking area from the tent, Finn wrestled helplessly with tangled ropes. "Dad, help me, this thing's like a spider web." I showed him how, memories rushing back when he once truly wanted to learn, before he became someone who only demanded inheritance. The question lingered. Why insist on camping when he couldn't even pitch a tent? As night fell, the firelight threw Finn's shadow against the trees, the warped shapes dancing like beasts. I prepared a simple meal. He sat in silence, eyes fixed on the flames, not with warmth, but with the glint of someone calculating. "Remember when you were 10? I tried to spark a memory. You'd only eat marshmallows if you burned them black. Your mother, she loved that." My voice caught. Venus used to say, "Camping brought out the best in people." Finn nodded, but his gaze drifted. Then, abruptly, "Tell me about your childhood, Dad, before the military, before the business. How poor was it?" I told him of Oregon summers working odd jobs, every dollar earned in sweat. "Sounds rough," he smirked. "Guess I was lucky, never had to learn those painful lessons." My chest tightened. Pain teaches value. What comes free only strips a man of himself. Finn was silent a moment, then asked quietly, "Do you know how to tell when someone's lying? Body language, tone, contradictions. Why do you ask?" "Just curious. You always see through people." In the firelight, his eyes flickered not with curiosity, but as if testing when I would see through his scheme. Later, as I banked the fire, the stars spread brilliantly overhead, breathtaking above, yet on the ground, the stillness felt like something was waiting, watching. "I'll take the first watch," Finn volunteered, his tone strangely calm. "You sure? Tomorrow's a long trek." "Yeah, I just want to listen, to the forest." I crawled into the tent, trusting he would wake me for my shift. Through the nylon walls, the crackle of the fire popped steadily, then ceased. What followed was a silence so dense, so deliberate, it felt like a knife suspended in the darkness, waiting for the moment to fall. The cold light pierced through the tent fabric like a dull blade, not heralding dawn, but foretelling a day of death. I opened my eyes, listening. Outside came the clash of metal, not the sound of breakfast being prepared, but heavy, dry, chain-like echoes, as though fate itself was being shackled around me. I unzipped the tent. The icy air knifed into my lungs, each breath leaving in a plume of white. Before me, Finn stood by the truck, moving with a precision and order he had never shown before. His eyes were cold, each motion rehearsed as though played out hundreds of times in his mind. One by one, the tools of survival, GPS, emergency beacon, rifle, food crates, vanished into the truck's cargo hold. "What's going on?" My voice cut through the morning mist. Finn flinched, then straightened, trying to hold a defiant stance. "I didn't bring you here to camp. I brought you here to end it. We still had 3 days planned. What's the rush?" Plans changed. He avoided my gaze, stressing each word. "The weather's turning bad." A lie hung between us, toxic as smoke. I knew Wyoming's sky was clear, unbroken. My military instincts, silent since I arrived here, now roared to life. "Finn," I steadied my voice. "Tell me the truth. What's really happening?" His face cracked like a dam breaking after years of pressure. His voice burst out, but his eyes were dry, lit only by the fire of hatred, fed by years of bitterness. "You want to know? I'm sick of it. Sick of your control, your manipulation, your endless judgment." "Son, I Don't call me son," he roared, fists clenched. "Sons aren't treated like employees. Sons don't have to beg for scraps while their father sits on piles of money." The venom in his voice struck like knives. This wasn't a sudden outburst, this was hatred, aged and sharpened over years. I gave you everything. You gave me nothing. His voice thundered like an indictment. You made me dependent, weak, chained by your damn checkbook. But now, I take back what should have been mine, all of it, by any means necessary. The words shook me. Fragments of memory snapped together into a single brutal picture. This trip had never been about reconciliation. It had always been about execution. So you finally figured it out, General. His laugh was icy. Took you long enough. Finn, if it's money you need, we can... I don't need handouts anymore. I want the business, the assets, everything you dangled over me all these years. The morning air froze solid around us. Before me wasn't my son, but a stranger wearing his face. You're going to leave me here. That's right. 40 miles of wilderness will teach you what real dependence feels like. My chest tightened, my voice turning to stone. Finn, you're sentencing me to death by nature. You should have thought about that before making me your puppet. He slammed the truck's hatch. Maybe you survive. Maybe you don't. Either way, I get what I've deserved all along. You're my blood. If you have even a shred of humanity left, don't do this. For a moment, his face faltered a flicker of doubt or mercy, but then it hardened again, utterly foreign. Let nature decide, Dad. I don't need to watch it happen. The engine roared to life. I lunged forward, desperate, but the truck rolled back. Through the windshield, I saw his final look, eyes of a stranger, wearing the mask of my son. Finn! My scream echoed against the distant cliffs. The truck vanished around a bend, the stench of exhaust clinging to my clothes, the last mark he left before abandoning me to be swallowed by the wilderness. Silence fell, heavy enough that I heard my heartbeat, each thud like a countdown to death. No voices, no engines, only the hiss of wind through the spruces and the far cry of a hawk. 20 years of sacrifice and sheltering ended in a death sentence delivered by my own blood. I was no longer faced with the choice of being a father, only with the single choice left to me, to become a survivor. The dust from Finn's truck still hung in the air like a funeral shroud, cloaking the forest and signaling that death was circling close. Shock? Too much of a luxury. At 65, more than 40 miles from civilization, in the heart of Wyoming grizzly country where wolves roamed hungry, I could not afford it. Decades of military discipline surged back, forcing me to breathe deep, steady, and keep my mind sharp. Rule 1 of survival. Assess resources. I searched my jacket and pants pockets. A wallet. My house keys. A small folding knife I had all but forgotten. No food. No water. No GPS. No emergency beacon. Only the clothes on my back and the will to live. Rule 2. Assess the environment. April in Wyoming meant nighttime temperatures dropping below freezing. Dense spruce forests, faint trails, absolute isolation. Ranger Victor Carson's warning echoed in my mind. Grizzlies active, wolves prowling, weather unpredictable. Rule 3. Survival priorities. Shelter, water, signal, direction in that order. I studied the sun for guidance. East meant deeper wilderness. West could lead to the highway, if I had the strength left. A half-buried memory returned. Rivers flow northwest. Follow them to find the park's edge. I set off, tracking the faint tire marks Finn had left. A few hundred meters on, they merged with animal paths. I chose that direction. Animals knew where water was. The harsh terrain punished my aging knees. Each step felt like torment. But anger fueled me, anger at Finn's betrayal, at my blindness, at 20 years of sacrifice spent raising a boy who carried darkness in his heart. The forest closed around me like a dark tunnel. Shafts of light pierced through the canopy, more prison bars than freedom. I broke branches to mark my trail, though I knew the odds of rescue were thin. The crunch of twigs beneath my boots echoed like breaking bones. Signs of grizzlies were everywhere. Claw marks gouged deep into tree trunks, massive paw prints sunken in the mud, and the pungent metallic stench of fresh scat still steaming. The air itself seemed thick with death. I made noise as I moved, recalling Carson's warning better to announce myself than stumble into a bear unawares. Yet deep inside, I knew Finn had left me in a place where the grizzlies might be the least of my concerns. Hours passed, my throat burned raw, lips cracked with thirst, body weakened. I strayed off track more than once, forced to backtrack. Every slowed step cost me daylight. Then a sound, mechanical, rhythmic, something not of nature. I froze. My heart pounded. Hunters, perhaps. Rangers. Or another trap laid by Finn. I held my breath. The noise grew clearer. Engines. Half a mile north. ATVs. More than one. Fear and hope tore at me. One voice in my head screamed caution. The other roared that missing this chance might mean losing my only shot at survival. I stumbled toward the sound, branches tearing my clothes, lashing my skin. Light broke ahead. I crashed through the trees and fell hard into a clearing. 4 ATVs stood idling. 4 riders stared at me, wide-eyed, as though a ghost had clawed its way out of a frozen grave. The leader, a bearded man in his mid-40s, sun-scorched face, eyes razor-sharp, cut his engine and strode toward me. "Sir, what happened? Why are you out here alone?" My voice rasped, trembling yet unyielding. "My son, he brought me here to kill me. He took everything left me for the wilderness to finish." The man's expression froze, then twisted into anger. "Someone abandoned you out here? In Wyoming? That's not just desertion, that's a death sentence." "I'm Asher Darwin. My son, Finn. He brought me out here under the guise of camping. But this was never a trip. He wanted me dead." The bearded man removed his helmet, revealing steady, piercing eyes. "I'm Owen Adam, former ranger. These are my team, and we won't let you die here." A woman handed me a water bottle. I drained it, liquid spilling from the corners of my mouth, still not enough. Owen's tone sharpened. "How long ago did this happen?" "About 4 hours." He exchanged glances with his team, then spoke with urgency. "We need to get you out immediately. Radio signals are weak, but from higher ground we can reach the station. And," he paused, checked his GPS, "if your son took the main road, it'll take him at least 6 hours to reach town. But I know a shortcut." "You mean—" I swallowed hard, my pulse pounding. I could return face him before he stages his false tragedy. Owen nodded, eyes gleaming like steel. "Easily. But the question is, do you want the police involved right now? Or do you have another plan?" Inside me, despair and fear hardened into iron. Finn had calculated my death but made one fatal miscalculation. He underestimated my instinct to survive, and the human bond of those who live in the wild. I met Owen's gaze, my voice dropping to a vow. "I'll return first, alive, and I'll make him see the ghost he thought he buried." Owen pressed his lips together and nodded firmly. "Then be ready. We'll take the path the maps forgot, and when we return, Finn will face the truth." The ATV ride through Yellowstone's hidden trails unfolded before me like reels of a battlefield film. The scenery blurred past. Rotting logs sprawled across the path, icy streams cutting like blades, sharp hairpin turns lying in wait like ambushes. Every stretch of road felt like a death trap. Owen Adam steered with the steady confidence of a man who knew this land intimately. His voice cut through the roar of engines. "I worked here as a ranger for 18 years. I've seen every kind of foolish decision. But to abandon someone deliberately, that's no mistake. That's a crime." We pushed through steep inclines, at times forced to dismount and drag the machines around fallen timber. Yet despite the obstacles, Owen delivered us to the asphalt sooner than expected. Ahead, the Yellowstone Timber Lodge emerged, rustic cabins, yellow lights glowing through the windows. But to me, it wasn't warmth I saw. It was a silent courtroom, a place where my son would bury himself with his own actions. I scanned the lot for the rental car. "Nothing yet." "Looks like your son is still on the road," Owen murmured. "You have time to prepare your welcome." His companions left their contact information, pledging to testify if this became a case for the courts. Owen handed me his card, his tone as firm as a verdict. If you don't make him pay, he'll do this again to someone else. This isn't just about father and son. This is about justice." I nodded. Inside my coat pocket, the folded legal documents pressed against me like loaded rounds. 3 weeks earlier in Portland, I had rewritten my will in a moment of bitter disappointment. Now, that choice stood as a sealed judgment. Finn would inherit nothing, no garage, no bank account, not even the home his mother, Venus, once cherished. Everything would go to wildlife preservation funds, veterans organizations, and a scholarship in Venus's name. I whispered, voice heavy as stone. "He wants a legacy? I'll give him one, but it will be the legacy of shame and a prison sentence." Preparing for the confrontation. Back in my room, I sat at the edge of the bed, spreading the documents across the table. Each page was a weapon, loaded and ready. I arranged them with care, like a soldier preparing for his final battle. I called Owen. "Owen, when Finn returns, I want everything captured, every word, every expression. You plan to confront him before the police? I'll give him exactly what he thinks he wants, a chance at inheritance, only for him to realize, right here at this table, that he's destroyed himself." There was silence on the line. Then Owen spoke, low and steady. "That's a strategy. I'll stand as witness. I'll bring my camera. Finn will say things the jury needs to see with their own eyes." I calculated. From Yellowstone to Bozeman's Highway, factoring in gas stops and meals, Finn would arrive between 9 and 10. He'd be tired, overconfident, expecting an empty room and a dead father. Instead, he would find me alive, alert, and ready. I rented the adjoining room for Owen. His camera had the perfect angle. My phone was preset with 911. Darkness fell, thick as an executioner's hood. The night of judgment. At 8:40, Owen tapped lightly at my door. He carried recording equipment, his expression weighted by a man who'd seen too much tragedy in the wild. He set up in the next room, his voice grave. "When he arrives, everything will be on record. If we hand this to the police, the charge is attempted murder in the first degree. In Wyoming, abandonment in the wilderness is treated as nothing less than a death sentence, just a few steps shy." I nodded. The trembling was gone, replaced by an icy calm. Then we wait. I sat facing the door. The legal documents lay neatly on the table, a paper verdict, black and white. 9 o'clock drew near. Headlights swept across the lot. The engine of the rental car rumbled. Finn had returned. The door opened. He stepped inside, wary. Then he froze. His face drained of blood as if he'd seen a ghost, but this ghost was flesh and bone, waiting with judgment. "Dad," his voice cracked. I smiled faintly. "Hello, son. How was the trip?" Shock on his face twisted swiftly into fear. "Dad, how are you here? How are you alive?" "I remember your last words clearly. Go meet the Grizzlies." "That wasn't advice, it was an execution order. But unlucky for you, I climbed back out of the grave you dug." He trembled, sweat beading on his forehead despite the Wyoming cold. "Dad, wait, you don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly. You led me there to die, you planned every detail. But you underestimated 2 things: my instinct to survive, and the solidarity of people who don't leave others to die." I raised the stack of papers. 3 weeks ago, I rewrote my will. Now it's final. You inherit nothing. The garage, the accounts, the house your mother loved, all gone. Everything will go to charity, to veterans, to a scholarship in Venus's name. The blood drained from his face. "No, I'm your son. You can't. Blood can turn executioner, Finn, and you chose to become the executioner of your own father." He collapsed into a chair, hollow-eyed. I turned for the door, my voice cold. "I'm calling the police. Attempted murder is still a felony, even when it fails." At the Bozeman police station, harsh fluorescent light glared down on a steel table, cold as a gallows. Detective John Lennon reviewed the case file. Owen's video, my sworn statement, Finn's own recorded confession. "Mr. Darwin," he said, "I've investigated wilderness crimes for 8 years. This is the most meticulously planned murder attempt I've ever seen. Your son will face 15 to 25 years." Through the glass, I saw Finn, 32, in handcuffs, led away like a murderer. The chains didn't just bind his hands, they bound the last illusions I'd ever held of him. Owen sat beside me, his expression grave. What now? I drew a slow breath. I returned to Portland. I'll finalize the foundation in Venus's name. The fortune he tried to stain will instead become a legacy that saves others. I looked outward, to the towering Absaroka Range. Nature was brutal but far fairer than man's heart. The epilogue. 3 days later, in Portland, a letter arrived from Finn, 5 pages of apologies, promises, pleas for reconsideration. I read it once, then fed it into the shredder. The machine devoured the pages, swallowing his last lies, severing the final thread of a bond already rotted through. Some relationships cannot survive an attempt at murder, no matter how much love or money you've poured into them. Survival and justice will always chill the soul. If this story gripped you, hit like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Your voice strengthens this community. And right now, a new journey awaits you on the left side of the screen.